All right. So welcome back to Kyle's Thoughts for the first new taping of the first episode. Today we're going to be watching the latest and greatest from Ben Shapiro, where he's going to be, it looks like, talking about critical race theory. And I'm going to give you my thoughts, my initial thoughts on this video.
Anything in this world that you want to be, right? Don't Daddy teach you that?
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if you're black or white or any color.
Critical race theory wants to end that.
Mobilize, get together with your friends, push back, because the time is now. All right, so the pushback to critical race theory has begun. Christopher Rufo is one of the lead researchers on that particular issue. He now works over at the Manhattan Institute, and he has a book coming out pretty soon with Harper, which, full disclosure, is also my publisher. And he's been pushing into sort of common parlance critical race theory. You know, it's been used as the term that was used before critical race theory was wokeism. Critical race theory is more specific because it actually.
So right off the bat, critical race theory is not wokeism. Okay, critical race theory is something that's taught in higher education, which talks more about how race and racism has played a systematic role in the history as well as the law of this country, right? And how it has been enacted and how it has been applied to non-white people, right? People of color. And this is something that is very important to note right away, is that a lot of these Republican commentators and pundits love to throw around critical race theory as the boogeyman. It is their new thing of interest. It is their new big talking point. But in reality, they're not even talking about critical race theory 99% of the time. It's just a token word. Okay, let's get back to it.
Goes to the ideological roots of all of this. Well, the root of the pushback has now created fruit, and you're seeing it all over, right? So you're seeing videos like here's one that went viral of a father and daughter, a black father and daughter, pushing back against critical race theory. It was an excellent video, and the reason it is so telling is because critical race theory suggests that all the systems of America are deeply racist and inherently directed at promoting the subservience of black Americans particularly. It means that you're basically saying to black people they have no agency. They have no agency in America, in the freest country in the history of the world, with the richest black families on planet Earth, on average. They have no agency whatsoever. And so here is a young black man named Corey Yeshua and his 6-year-old daughter.
What world does Ben Shapiro live in? He seems to think that because there's a handful of successful black people that all of a sudden racism is dead. This is about akin to the same logic as Lil Wayne, who famously has said in several...
I am a young, black, rich. If that don't let you know that America understands black matter these days, I don't know what it is. Don't come at me with that dumb man. My life matter, especially to
several interviews. You know, how can America be racist? Look at me. This anecdotal evidence is very childish, and for someone who has superior intellect, as Ben Shapiro likes to be, claimed to have, this is very amateurish. This is very small, very critical thinking coming from Ben Shapiro over here. Because if the world worked like that, then why don't we see black and brown and people of color all across this country getting the wealth of that, the same level and speed of that of white folk? Systemic problems in this country have been going on for hundreds of years. They didn't even have the same starting point at the game, and yet everyone likes to pretend on the right that the game's fair, right? And that the game, that we all start at the same spot, and if you just work harder, then maybe one day you'll also be successful. Meritocracy in and of itself is a lie. It's something that the elites have pushed down on the common people. This belief that you too can become one of the 1% if you just work really, really hard, and it's simply untrue. So yeah, let's keep listening to these great fucking opinions.
Royalty pushing back on critical race theory and saying this is nonsense and it hurts black people, which it absolutely does. Depriving people of agency is the worst single thing you can do to anyone in life. It is the worst thing. When you tell people they have no agency in their own life, you cannot do anything worse to a child than that, truly. And when you create actions that give them no agency, obviously, that is an extension of that very idea. Anyway, here was Corey Yeshua. This went completely viral, of course.
Daddy teaches you can be anything in this world that you want to be, right? Don't Daddy teach you that?
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if you're black or white or any color.
Doesn't matter if you're black, white, brown, yellow. right?
Black.
And how we treat people is based on who they are and not what color they are.
And if they're nice and smart.
See, this is how children think right here. Critical race theory wants to end that. Not with my children. It's not gonna happen.
Good for him, right? So this went viral.
I'd love if they would give him, like, you know, another 10 seconds to elaborate there on what exactly critical race theory is and what he thinks it is and how it applies. Depriving kids of agency. The statement that Ben keeps going back to here, it makes absolutely no fucking sense. How are you depriving them of agency by telling them, hey, you know what? The system, it's a little broken and it's gonna take some fixing. But in order for us to fix it for, you know, those who come after us and our kids and our kids' kids, why wouldn't you want them to have equal opportunity, right? No one here, and that I've seen, any legitimate commentator has never advocated for equality of outcomes. That's just something that we all understand is not really feasible and not really practical. But equality of opportunity, now that's something that we could address yesterday. But it's something that Ben Shapiro refused to even acknowledge, let alone point any sort of real criticism or debate or any sort of real logic as to why he thinks the way he does, right? He just kind of says things like this without really going in depth as to how it deprives kids of agency. What exactly is depriving them of their agency here? They have no agency because they're being told that the country was built on the backs of slaves, knowing that, you know, their ancestors were the ones who helped build this nation as great as it's been or has been in the past. Up to what it is. And, you know, there's something that is to be said about the fact that we've paid reparations to white slave owners after the Civil War, but we didn't feel the need to do the same thing towards the slaves. So yeah, Ben, let's hear what you got to say.
There's an Illinois dad who got up recently at a school board hearing pushing against critical race theory. Again, black guy. And he said, This is not.
This is another one that I love. Is like Republicans will constantly go to like their token black person who says, you know, whatever point they're trying to get across, who agrees with them, and they'll say, "See, this guy has said that, you know, he thinks the same way I do, so clearly I'm not in the wrong," which is utter nonsense. I mean, people may find this a little bit offensive, but, you know, being black or a person of color, or you know, gay, lesbian, trans, etc., doesn't just give you the voice of the entire community and the entire population of said people, right? Like, I don't get on here and expect my word to be taken as the fucking beacon of truth for all mixed white and Mexican people. That doesn't make any sense, right? My thoughts and opinions and views are those of my own. They're not for all people, not even close. So why does Ben feel the need to constantly do this shit where he picks out a fucking person who agrees with him on the right, who's also a person of color, and then just says, see, it can't be racist. It's fucking nonsense.
Nonsense. He said color was not discussed in my home at all.
The only race it is the human race. I never raised my sons to see anybody as a color. Color was never even discussed in my house at all. All we know is that as children grow, they just see other kids and they'll just immediately start playing. There is no a child sees them and like, why is his skin color like that of mine? We never discussed that. When it all comes down to it, people are just people. My sons never had to talk about white people, about Asian people. All they know is that they were people. They were their friends. They played with them. They never once came home and said, Dad, my white friend across the street, that they just said my friends.
Okay, but that's not even, like, again, this is a complete misunderstanding of what critical race theory is, or how being taught about race in the classroom is going to make you somehow prejudice or not like another person of a different color, right? Just because, this is the thing that cracks me up with fucking conservatives. Just because white people have done terrible things in the past doesn't mean it's your fault. I'll say it again. Just because people of your race have done something in the past doesn't mean it's your fault. Now, you can address those concerns and you can address those issues and fight for things on a systematic level that will help fix those grievances of the past. But to have this notion that you should feel guilt, white guilt, or this kind of thing is utter nonsense, right? That's a principle of wokeism and kind of this new, I don't want to say brand, but a version of the left that gets very hung up on the culture war bullshit, when in reality it doesn't really matter, right? Like, what you as an individual have no more fucking guilt for the crimes of the United States past than anyone else who's a citizen of this country at this point, right? You want to be upset about what you've done, great. Advocate for policy changes, advocate for things that'll make things better. Reparations, for example, is a great topic that could be addressed on how to help this wrong. Bringing wealth back into these communities that have been devastated for decades by redlining and gerrymandering, as well as pushing out people who have been growing up in these communities for decades. And then, gentrification comes in and pushes them out and raises the prices, and then we continue to create ghettos and lower class income income areas in which we just point to as an example of what's bad. So yeah, again, this is just utter nonsense. And two, to say that like the whole thing about kids really doesn't make sense to me, right? No one is arguing that kids are racist. I've never seen that thrown around, but this seems to be a common point going on here. Kids obviously are not inherently racist. Hate is taught, but it is taught by people like Ben Shapiro and Donald Trump and, Dave Rubin, for example, Steve Crowder, all these people who use these things where they'll be like, there was a murder today and the guy who shot him was black, and there was a robbery and who was it? He was black. You know what I mean? And so it's like you associate these violent crimes and violent things with a certain type of people, and you may not say, all black people are dangerous, but everybody knows what the message is you're trying to get across. You know what I mean? That's the problem with Donald Trump, is that he would come out and just say the quiet part. And that's the part that a lot of people think. So, and no one's out here claiming kids are racist. So I think we should just stop that, full stop, because this is just utter nonsense.
Okay, and of course, this is exactly right. The pushback is happening. Even the mainstream media, the reason that they are starting to get so worried about this and to lie about it is because they are deeply, deeply worried that the right is going to be able to mobilize on this, because people in the middle, right, that unmotivated 60% in the middle, are looking at the left and saying, what you're preaching right now is cultic, crazy garbage that tears away every system of freedom in the United States. Now, here's a PBS reporter fully acknowledging on national TV on Sunday that critical race theory is mobilizing people, as well it should.
Specific to this idea of critical race theory, I have to tell you, I just spent some time reporting on this county in Virginia, about an hour outside of Washington. And to your point, this is something that is mobilizing people and resonating very deeply. It was about a 100-degree day. Dozens and dozens and dozens of parents, mostly white in this largely affluent county, showed up to a school board meeting. For many of them, the very first school board meeting they'd ever attended, specifically because of this one issue.
Hey, as well they should. The push.
Does it mention the part where the school says that critical race theory isn't even taught? No? Now we just missed that part, huh, Ben? Don't want to talk about that, do we? See, this is the thing. The left sucks at messaging, 100%. The right has this ability to adapt, grip themselves onto a culture war topic and just fucking run with it for weeks on end and just use it as the boogeyman for every fucking issue that they have against minorities because they're racist. And this is something that, us on the left really need to work on, is how we're going to address this kind of shit, because we don't, or at least I personally don't subscribe to the culture war nonsense. And that's exactly what this is. It's fanning the fucking fires while claiming that you're all for, bringing people together and that they shouldn't see color and they shouldn't see race. Yet you're in fact inciting, or basically trying to incite, a race war, is what I've come to understand as the end goal for these fucking idiots. So yeah, let's hear what Ben has to say about that.
Pushback has begun. Again, if you want to renormalize the institutions, if you want to make them normal again, then what you're going to have to do is stand up and say no. And people in the middle have to be made aware. They are aware now, they're waking up to it, and they are fighting back. And this scares the living hell out of the left, because this is the first institutional pushback that we have seen in America for quite some time against a systemic, motivated left. And it's great.
You want to talk about systemic problems?
The first thing you got to do is do what Rufo has done and others, we've done it on the show, expose critical race theory for what it is. Number two, tell people they have to form coalitions with people who are in the middle.
What is it, Ben? What is critical race theory? Why so much talk about it, but never a fucking definition, huh?
Those these coalitions have to be mobilized against this very core, hardened group of people who are pushing a radical ideology, and the institutions can, in fact, be taken back. I talk about this in my new book, The Authoritarian Moment, at length.
What institutions is he talking about? Critical race theory is not taught in any fucking elementary school or even high school, for that matter, anywhere in the country. The fact that they keep spouting this nonsense of systemic takeover of the left makes no fucking sense, right? The left is probably the most hated and vilified group in American politics because of propaganda bullshit like this, where people have no idea what the left actually stands for. They think they do, right? Because of what they hear on Fox News, Shapiro, Daily Wire, etc. But it's not reality.
Because it's really, really important. Okay, so meanwhile, the media is pushing back on all of this, right? And they're telling you lies about all of this. The media have decided that they are going to simply lie about what critical race theory is. So now, because there's a giant pushback, because Americans are pushing back against critical race theory, because finally, for the first time in a very long time, you have a large swath of Americans looking at a movement from the left that's now been promoted across the military, across your schools, across your universities, and across your media, and in sports, and in every area of your life, because we have noticed it. The media has come up with two areas of pushback, because again, they are activists. Critical race theory, as the founders say, of critical race theory is not merely an ideology or philosophy. It is, in fact, about activism. Quote, critical race theory contains an activist dimension. It not only tries to understand our social situation, but to change it. Richard Delgado, Gene...
Yeah, you know why that is, Ben, right? You do know, right? You understand that, like, there's facts that don't care about your feelings on this issue, Ben. And the facts state that Black Americans have been constantly put down systemically by the law, by the way in which we decide neighborhoods, the way in which we decide tax funding, the way in which schools are funded. All of this comes back around to an issue involving race. Whether or not they want to admit it, it doesn't fucking matter, because that's what it is. It's a fact, and facts don't care about your feelings.
Stefanczyk, critical race theory introduction, right? This is their goal, is to change things. And many in the media have drunk from the well. They've imbibed. They're infused with the spirit of critical race theory. So they've come back with two angles of pushback. Angle of pushback against the pushback, number one, is actually, you just don't know what critical race theory is. And you've seen this over and over. So you saw Mark Lamont Hill, who is a radical idiot. He had on James Lindsay, and he started explaining to him, well, you know, let me explain how this really isn't about Gramsci, and you haven't read enough Gramsci, and let me explain how it's really not about Delgado or Stefanczyk. Purely, it's about various other Marxist thinkers, and really has nothing to do with Marxism, even though everybody I'm quoting is a Marxist. And everybody's like, wow, that's it. He knows critical... Okay, I just read you the tenets of critical race theory. Now you know the tenets of critical race theory. They, in their inception, were not vague. They've been made deliberately vague so that people who are criticized can then say, actually, you don't know even what you're talking about. Actually, you've never read any critical race theory. Actually, you are just saying...
Does he understand that nothing he just said proves his point? Nothing at all in that little fucking rant it describes at all what the issue is that he has with critical race theory, or how it's demonizing kids and robbing them of their fucking agency, and how they'll never be able to grow up thinking that they can be something special because of critical race theory in the schools, and it's teaching our kids that they're racist. All right, dude.
Something that is... Okay, so the way this is broadened out in the public view with regard to the media, and you have members of the media saying, actually, critical race theory is just us teaching accurate history. Accurate history is just critical race theory. Okay, the answer is no, it's not. Because critical race theory, again, assumes that whiteness is pervasive everywhere, that white supremacy is pervasive in every institution, and that institutions and principles of power were created in order...
Yo, who made the institutions, Ben? Who fucking formed them, Ben? Was there a whole lot of black input when they were making the fucking Constitution that I don't know about? Or was there slaves still when they wrote all men were created equal?
To reestablish and re-enshrine white supremacy. Okay, that's what critical race theory says. It's in its founding tenets. Okay, but what you get is from the media is if you push back against this, you get the coverage from the Washington Post. Okay, here's how the Washington Post covers the pushback against critical race theory. Quote, critical race theory holds that racism is systemic in the United States, not just a collection of individual prejudices, an idea that feels obvious to some and offensive to others. Rufo alleged that efforts to inject awareness of systemic racism and white privilege, which grew more popular following the murder of George Floyd by police, posed a grave threat to the nation. It's the latest cultural wedge issue, playing out largely but not exclusively in debate over schools. At its core, it pits progressives who believe white people should be pushed to confront systemic racism and white privilege in America against conservatives who see these initiatives as painting all white people as racist. Again, the way that the Washington Post is boiling this down is that if you believe that there is racism in America, then this means that you are a critical race theorist. Right? And that if you don't believe that, if you believe that there is no racism in America, you're conservative. That, of course, is a great simplification. Okay, but this is what CNN's Bakari Seller says. He says, if you're angry at critical...
Bro, what about the fucking simplification that you just spouted in the beginning of this bullshit, that any critical race theory is going to make kids fucking lose their agency and not think that they can be anything in life because the system's stacked against them? What about that one, huh? I had no point fucking simplifying it then, huh?
Race theory, it's just because you don't like regular history. You don't want to be taught regular history. Here he goes with Anderson Cooper.
I think that critical race theory can go by another name, America's history. It's amazing that we're having this discussion where we're celebrating Juneteenth, and now individuals don't want to teach us what led us up to Juneteenth. It's as if we want to keep a secret from our children that the founders of this country actually owned slaves. At what point will we be able to teach children that what happened 6 years ago yesterday in Charleston, South Carolina, was a white nationalist who walked into a church and murdered 9 people? I mean, that is a part of America's history.
Okay, I have a question. You can teach all of those things to kids. And in fact, every single school child in America knows those things if they have been taught history at all in every state in America. That there was slavery.
Kind of capping here, Ben. Kind of capping, buddy. Because most people I know, well into their 20s and the 30s, don't even know about Juneteenth or what exactly happened in Texas and how exactly that holiday came to be. They had no idea until, they Googled it because they got an extra fucking day off. But let's hear what he's got to say.
Slavery in America, and that many of the founders owned slaves. Yes, we all know that because that is part of American history. In fact, there was you may have missed it, there was a giant civil war where like hundreds of thousands of Americans died over exactly this question. And in fact, pretty much everybody understands that a white nationalist...
Yo, self-report from fucking Ben Shapiro, ladies and gentlemen. He just admitted that the South did in fact fight for fucking slaves. You hear that, Republicans? States' rights argument about Confederate flag is false.
Shot up a black church in South Carolina because we were all alive when that happened. But the basic idea here is that if you don't push the idea that every institution in America is rife with racism and you as a white person don't properly understand racism, this means that you're just not studying regular history. You get the same thing from the Washington Post.
Yeah, Ben, but there's a difference between understanding racism and just knowing about racism, right? Like you can see the fucking civil rights movement and be like, okay, obviously that was wrong. We shouldn't have sprayed down black people off of dining, tops and sent attack dogs on them for peacefully protesting and beat the shit out of them. You can be like, yeah, that's wrong. But guess what? That doesn't really exactly set the bar too fucking high now, does it? Like does that, you have to bend over backwards to admit that one, don't you, buddy? He's so ridiculous sometimes with the way that he goes about trying to fucking pontificate his arguments and talk all this shit about things that he truly doesn't understand. Like, the problem isn't that like white people don't understand racism. It's that you don't have the perspective of someone who's actually had to deal with it on a systemic basis, where it plays into a role almost, on a daily basis for some people.
Jonathan Capehart, and here he was saying the same thing. People are trying to stop us from learning history. So this is misdirect number one, is that if you hate critical race theory because it's garbage, the real thing you're trying to do is stop people from learning history. It's a lie.
The people who are trying to, pushing back against quote unquote critical race theory, which is basically a blanket way of keeping us from recognizing, talking about, and teaching the fullness of our history. What they're doing is they're denying the country its full retelling. The United States is a great nation, and even though people are trying to keep us from learning all of our history, Miss Opal Lee showed that it is possible to do things to make it possible so that the generations coming and the generations unborn get to know their entire history, warts and all.
Okay, so this is misdirect number one. Is that critical race theory is just history? No, it's not. Literally the people who wrote critical race theory say it's not just that, right? They say that Brown versus Board of Education, for example, is a...
Well, at least we can agree on one thing, right? Because critical race theory isn't just the history of the United States. That is true. It is a very much more involved theory past that.
racist institution designed to uphold white supremacy. Okay, that's what critical race theorist Derek Bell says. Okay, that's not teaching history, that's teaching garbage. Okay, so that's misdirect number one, is that if you don't like critical race theory, the pushback to the pushback. You don't like critical race theory, it's because you don't want to study history. Then there's pushback number two. Pushback number two is that critical race theory doesn't exist. Poof, it's in your imagination. And if you've noticed that all the theories of critical race theory have been entered into education, and if you've noticed that there are educational departments that explicitly say critical race theory is taught, if you noticed that there are actual military departments that talk openly about critical race theory, if you've noticed that Robin DiAngelo is getting hired by your corporation, or Ibram X. Kendi is being pushed by your corporation, or that on your recommended book list from your toothbrush company is Ibram X. Kendi, if you've noticed any of this, it's because you're crazy. It's all in your imagination. So Chuck Todd, again, this...
How about the pushback that you're just a fucking moron?
You cannot trust your media because they lied to you, because they are part of this institutional push. Here is Chuck Todd from MSNBC saying, critical race theory, this is all a creation. It's just a creation.
Let's take this this so-called controversy over critical race theory, and I say so-called controversy because it's a creation that keeps people watching or keeps people clicking, and suddenly, yada, 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 school board meetings are getting disrupted, right? And you're just sort of like, wait a minute, are you covering the news that people need to know?
Yes, we are. You're not. You're downplaying it, basically pretending that none of this exists. Of course it exists. It exists in schools. We have private schools teaching it. We have public schools teaching it. And your job as the media is to expose that. And yet you say, well, that's not newsworthy. You know what's newsworthy? Whatever Donald Trump ate and crapped out today. That's newsworthy. What's truly newsworthy is a theory. We'll go for 4 years on Donald Trump as a Russian cat's paw, but we won't spend 30 seconds on most school boards in major metropolitan areas of the United States have taken up the rubric of anti-racism, which is really just a renaming of critical race theory. That we won't pay any attention to.
Ben, but those are completely different ideas, my guy. This is what I'm talking about. Y'all just be slapping fucking labels on whatever you want. Just the new boogeyman.
Okay, Chris Hayes does the same thing on MSNBC. He tries to blame the right for even reacting to critical race theory in the first place. He had a chyron the other day on MSNBC that is so beyond crazy. It's like, he said that the right is fixated on race. We're fixated on race? That's all you guys care about. It's literally all you guys talk about. Like 24 hours a day. And when we notice...
Bro, which party's trying to enact fucking voter suppression laws specifically targeting black areas? Like, how does anyone take this dude seriously? Like, he's so scared to just, like, come out and admit, like, what he actually views. But it's so obvious to anyone who understands the policies that he supports.
So we push back. Then it's, oh, I can't believe they noticed. I mean, like, really, look at these people obsessed with race. Here's Chris Hayes doing this routine.
Critical race theory, as a sort of technical term, is basically a set of analytic tools that academics in some fields use, starting in law, for studying systematic racism in our society. The right has rendered the term meaningless through overdeployment, making it into a culture war rallying cry. Since February, month over month, the mention...
Yeah, I hate to fucking agree with MSNBC here, but they're kind of right. Like, it's just thrown around as like any sort of dispute against racism or being even talking about racism. It's just, oh, well, that's critical race theory and it's bullshit. Like, that's just an easy little fucking throw off that they give you.
Mentions of the term have more than doubled. The entire right-wing media machinery has become obsessed, whipping up a moral panic almost entirely among white people that their children are being taught toxic truths about America's long history of racial oppression and hierarchy.
Okay, it's amazing, right? Oh my God, they're mentioning critical race theory. Yes, we noticed. You mentioned it and we noticed. So the gaslighting is on two levels. One is it's just history. No, it's not. It's an actual theory that was meant to be an activist theory according to its founders. Second, the lie is that it doesn't exist. It absolutely does exist, and it has a cost. And the cost is that we are not allowed anymore, according to critical race theory, to call out problems as we see them in the United States, whether they are problems of actual racism or whether they are problems that are not due to racism but result in an unequal outcome. Because it turns out that if you want to prevent unequal outcome, if you would like more equal outcome, people have to act differently. But if you notice that people have to act differently, if, for example, you say that crime should be policed, right, that you should actually spend time policing crime, rather than suggesting that the cops are racist,
Why don't we talk about how crime is directly linked to economic status and welfare of the citizens of the area? Huh, Ben? Have you ever thought about that one? How about instead of just going after, we should attack criminals, why don't you try to figure out what the fucking cause of the criminals are in the first place?
This is because you have not imbibed from the well of critical race theory, you have not recognized your own white supremacy. You have not recognized that the police are, in fact, a tool of white supremacy in the United States. And
Bro, the sheriff's organization literally started from catching slaves. Like, he's just so ignorant about the things that he talks about. Everyone thinks he's like this fucking Republican champion of like ideas and intellect, when really he's just uttering the same nonsense of the likes of Tucker Carlson. Like, there's nothing original or new coming out of his brain right now.
Costs of this are largely borne by black Americans. Not entirely, but largely borne by black Americans. The same people who are pushing critical race theory are pushing defund the police because they believe that the police are, in the words of Nicole Hannah-Jones, basically the heirs to the slave catchers. And so is it any wonder that you see kids being caught in crossfire in the Bronx? We have video of kids being caught in a crossfire in the middle of New York City. This wouldn't have happened even 10 years ago in New York City.
See, this is once again about the thing that I talked about earlier. You see, he's going to point out a fucking crime in which a black person did something bad so that you can make the connection that black people are dangerous and black people are bad. But he's not going to say it explicitly.
When you drink deep from critical race theory, what you end up is more suffering, more inequality, more cruelty, more violence, and apparently more happy members of the media. And the pushback has begun. It should begin. And frankly, I'm ecstatic to see how far the pushback is going at this point. Again, mobilize, get together with your friends, push back, because the time is now.
Of course he's fucking excited. This whole dude's been trying to fucking start a race war for years. So he's just like, it's just all coming to the surface now with these guys, you know? So anyways, that was it. That was my fucking thoughts on Ben Shapiro's The Pushback Goes Viral. Parents have had enough with critical race theory. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please feel free to subscribe. Make sure to like the video. Leave a comment down below if there's something you want to see my thoughts on specifically, whether it be a video or an idea. Feel free to leave a comment as well. A lot more of these will be coming your way. And yeah, till next time.